Hi folks, welcome to today's Coffee with John. I've just finished my coffee actually. So we are looking at 1 John, and for those of you in the new year who are first time here, I'm always amazed that there's always new people. You can go back and you can go through the whole book with us. What we're doing is we're just looking at a book of the Bible, and in this case it's 1 John, the letter of 1 John. And just reflecting on it as we are in today's world. And we have been going through this, and we are now at chapter 3 and at verse 11. And let me just read it to you, because I'm going to read verse 12 as well. You'll see why. For this is the message you heard from the beginning. We should love one another. Do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. Why did he murder him? Because his own actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. Well, it's, love one another. It's such a cliche, isn't it? Oh, we're all about love and not hatred. And I remember going to preach. I was on a motorbike. In fact, I was being given a lift on a motorbike by a friend to preach in Argyllshire. I think it was in Tarbert, and we came up and I preached the service, and it was 1 John. And afterwards, this woman came up to me and said, "Well, I loved that, but you sounded like a liberal." And I said, "Well, what's a liberal? What do you mean I sounded like a liberal?" And she said, "Well, you talked about love a lot." Well, I'm sorry, that is not the definition of what a liberal is. My argument would be that liberals can talk about love a lot, but you don't really know what it is, because love is what's described here. There's a real content in 1 John. This is love, that God loved us, gave himself for us, and so on. But Christians are not to be people who hate, and that's the point. The point is, we should love one another. This is the message you've heard from the beginning. Now, Jesus made that very, very clear, and John is repeating that. And so he gives an example, and he gives the example of Cain. Now, that's a fascinating example. Verse 16, by the way, we're told in terms of love that Jesus laid down. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. So love has a huge amount of content. It's not just wearing a T-shirt saying I love, there's an element of self-sacrifice that is involved in it. It's not just sentiments. It's not even just simply words. It's everything. We ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. That's what verse 16 says as well, but we'll come to that in a moment. But let me just give this idea of Cain. I'm looking at what David Jackman's got here, because there's one quote in particular I wanted from it that I really, really liked. Cain's story is recorded in Genesis 4. Now, if I was Jordan Peterson, I'd be taking another 2 hours to tell you about this and all the psychological implications of it. But it's very simple. Instead of loving his brother, Cain hated Abel. And he hated him because, although they both grew up, if you like, in the Garden of Eden, or rather, they would have been told about the Garden of Eden and everything that was involved, he hated his brother because Cain's religious worship was quite superficial. He offered God some of the fruits of the soil. It was an offer that didn't cost him anything, that didn't take into account the seriousness of sin, and that was not offered in a right spirit, probably a right spirit of, Jackman says, submission and penitence. God had said to Cain, look, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But he hadn't done what was right. That was the point. So instead of going along with that, what he actually did was he was angry against God, and so he became angry against his brother. If you do what is right, if you do not do what is right, rather, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Well, Cain didn't rule over it. So he allowed sin to dominate his life, and he ended up killing his brother. And that's the conflict. And this is the bit I wanted to read from Jackman. I thought this was really good. That conflict still rages in every human life. Is it God's will or mine? Am I going to obey him or run my life as I want to? The cosmic conflict, he says, still continues. Hatred is still the world's currency, despite the fact that it talks about love and, love trumps hate, and you go on an anti-hate rally and it's full of hatred. Hatred is the world's currency. The world hates Christians. I kind of, towards the end of last year now, I kind of felt, oh, I'm beginning to get back into the groove a bit with some things. And one of the ways I knew that was the hate mail just really increased. Why? It's just extraordinary. Well, as Jackman says, we shouldn't be surprised when that happens. It is the way the master went, should not the servant tread it still, as Horatio Bonar wrote in his hymn, Go labour on, spend and be spent. So, I hope you've had a good new year. Listen to this message. We should love one another. Let's not be like Cain, who murdered his brother. Let's more be like Christ. And we'll see tomorrow what that means. We'll look more at what it means when the world hates us, and more what it means when we love one another. But it's just so important. God bless you. See you then. Bye.